Genesis 1:1. Which of these claims, this is kind of a complex thing, rely on a biological mechanism? Now, biological mechanism is a way of saying evolutionary science. That's the biological mechanism is saying things going from a lesser to a greater. It's all those different terminologies. That's the broad form for the study of evolution, is understanding the biological mechanisms that created things. So, did any of those things that happen in Genesis 1:1 rely on a biological mechanism? Not one. And so, again, that's what we're really focusing on with this, is we're focusing on the fact that we're a created being that was set apart in so many different ways. How does that make you all feel? Valuable, unbelievably valuable. Uh, C.S. Lewis talks about what I mentioned a second ago. He didn't make us automatons. C.S. Lewis, he describes, and it's in Mere Christianity, Book 2, Chapter 3, that a God that created something that could disobey him, and I know we've referenced this already, that is something so different. He made us so different than anything. Can a dog be anything but a dog? Can a cat, if you hit a cat, sometimes they're a little weird afterwards, like if you see those ones limping around and act more like a dog and they'll swim in a pool, those are some weird cats. But they act like cats, and that's, we're made after our own kind, and we've talked about that through this summer. But it should be inspiring, the fact that we do have this world. Now, what does the world, how does it want us to treat us? So you see some categories here. Oop, I left my prompt up there. The biblical claim, the scientific claim, and the philosophy claim. There's an interesting thing about, I kind of empathized with the true evolutionary biologists when I was going through this, because they never made the claim about God. They made the claim that we observe the natural world, we see things change over time, so we perceive the origin of the species came from a lower form to a higher form. That's what Darwinism came together. Philosophies came along and said, ooh, if we came from nature and we can explain everything we've been, then life has no purpose. Nature is all that exists. Morality is only biology. We only do the things we do because that's how we were evolved to respond to circumstances over time. Does that kind of make sense? So the evolutionists, the scientists will just say, hey, we've observed these traits, and the philosopher comes along and say, now that we've observed these things, what does that mean for us? And so arguing with an evolutionist is not arguing about what we observe in science as much as what does that mean if it is observed that way. What do you think about that claim? That they're intertwined, they're brought together. It is science, but it is also this philosophy of what that means for us.
The world embraces that a whole lot easier than it does Christianity.
100%. But is there just as much of a faith there? There's a lot of times where life having no purpose is more comfortable for some people, unfortunately, because that means eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. We have no purpose to what we're supposed to do. You have no reason to wake up in the morning, or you have no guiding principles in your life. And you see those people around us who, it's almost like the world is happening around them and they just really don't care. They're going to do what they feel right about. But science has made claims all the time. And what we're going to get into next is this idea that science is going to make claims. How do Christians involve themselves in those claims? Because science is a human process where we go, we observe, we try to justify, and then we take those learnings and then we try to explain the things around us. Well, how good are humans at explaining things that happen around us? Really? We're not very good. Go ask the weatherman to just explain what's going on with our weather right now, and how much time do we have to prepare for a tornado. We can't even figure that out. They plop down on us and we're completely beholden to the science. We feel like we understand with the weather, and we know nothing about, really. We have no way to control it. If we really understood the weather, could we control it? Maybe. But we don't. We know there's these phenomenons that are so big around us. And now the weather is simple compared to biology. Talk to any of the teachers we have in this room, or doctors, about how complex the human body is to be able to do what we do over a lifespan. And that can only come from a designer. And that's why the comfort in Genesis 1:1, why it feels good to have a creator, because it explains so much of what we do. When someone says evolution proves blank, what kind of claim comes after that? It proves we came from mud. Then the philosophy comes in after that point. Evolution proves we came from a lower being. Well, that means that people who are lower than us or at a different stage in evolution are less important than us, right? The lower being, higher being. Won't get into it, but go, if you're interested, go look up eugenics and the connection with evolution and the connection with African Americans and Africans around the world and the slave trade. There was a connection there because they believed these people were less a lower being, and they could justify, oh, they're lower than us because we're more evolved, because we're in this continent, and there was this whole belief structure that came out of it, and they tried to prescribe value to human life. And so evolution claims, so we observe that there are higher and lower beings and more evolved and less evolved things, and so that means now we can treat people differently. That's the philosophy that humans then apply on top of what we observe in science. And it gets dark in a hurry. Go look at what is going on in Massachusetts right now. If you don't know, science has deemed life begins after birth, and so now you can terminate a pregnancy all the way up until the day of birth. And so that's a very dark thing to think about, science prescribing a value of human life, because if a human life is over here in one state in a mother, and then it leaves that mother, now it has value. That's what science and philosophy get us. And so what I want to call back to is this biblical value that starts at creation and ends with Jesus on the cross. Anyone else having thoughts? I need to stop filibustering that this is a class, not a sermon.
Well, it always seems to me that when they decide the value of a human life, their life always has value.
Because we're human, we're selfish.
But that flows back into, why did God make us? So that we could rebel against it. Because God wants love. He doesn't want mindless. He could create mindless drones to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to make mistakes, but just always know evolution proves this, to then there's a claim that comes after that. Almost always. They're not just wanting to prove the origin of man because nothing else matters. They're wanting to prove the origin of man to have control over people, maybe, or maybe it's simply to disprove. But the philosophers and the people around it, and when I say philosophers, there's a different way to think about it. If you come to, where's Brandon? And you say, hey, what's going on with my car? And he immediately knows what's going on. Is that philosophy claim says, I know this, so I know this. And then biblical claims, this is what we should be. This is what we should do because we have a plan, a design, something that came before us. And so I'm not trying to harp on a philosopher or even that level of thinking. But as Christians, we've really got to keep that biblical structure at the very beginning when we try to reason through life. Any other thoughts?
Well, we philosophize with the information that we have in the scriptures.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
there's times.
That's not a bad word.
No.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like science is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But how you use it is the problem.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you talked about God creating something that he was willing for it to do something that he didn't want it to do.
Yeah.
Where we're in a world today where they're creating AI, and that's their biggest fear, that it'll do something that they
don't want it to do.
So we've come full circle there.
That's some great philosophy there. That's some great philosophy. No, and that's, I don't say and trying to justify each one of these things, but I think as Christians, we can use science, we can use philosophy. We just have to do it from the perspective of always trying to point back to this creator, this plan, because things get weird, and I'll just leave it that way without getting into human history, when you try to let humans really justify anything they want to do, when you let humans be the deciding factor of what's right and wrong. You just look to very recent human history of less than 100 years ago and what people philosophized was right and wrong over in Europe. It's crazy how quickly things can change when we don't have a biblical base for our philosophies. And that's the point to how many people had great biblical philosophy at their core and created great science. There's just as many cases of that. Where would evolution actually touch Christian theology? if it was real, what would it change of what we believe? Does that make sense? Where would it interact with us? So, image of God, what makes humans unique? So, it would obviously touch that, right? Because if we're not created, if we were a random occurrence of time and energy and things colliding together, that doesn't put us in the image of God anymore, correct? Yep. If someone wouldn't mind reading Romans 5:12 through 21.
Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. For till the law, sin was in the world, but sin was not imputed when there was no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come.
No, that's good. That'll be just fine. We can read it for greater context there, but Paul is basing everything off of what? A man, someone coming into this world. And so when I say that evolution would change and touch things, Paul is it Paul there? Yeah, I believe so. Paul is describing these scenarios that how sin entered the world to justify what? The gospel, Christ and his salvation, because through one man, biology can't explain how sin entered the world, right? If we were not a created being and there was no such thing as right and wrong, and we were just a concept of evolution over time, when would have sin entered the world? Would it have been when the first amoeba killed another amoeba and it consumed him for his energy? Would that be the first sin that interacted with us? And I know this is a weird way to argue through this, but I'm trying to get it to these absurdities. When you take it down to an amoeba killing another amoeba, you realize how odd it would be to try to justify sin with evolution. Because at some point, sin would have to, and even if a Christian says, well, I believe we used evolution over time, and maybe it wasn't a literal 7 days. I don't really want to get into that because there's a challenge there. But if God did create us to be an evolution thing, and that's how he did his creation, when did sin enter? When humans finally got to Adam, and then sin was created. It's a weird concept, is it not, to think about? And I know I keep using that term, but I'm trying not to overly disparage, but it's a challenging thing to wrap our heads around, sin entering the world if we don't have a creation and a God who picked a point in time when we were allowed to being, and we didn't just develop over millions and millions of years.
Even the definition of sin itself would be so broad that you wouldn't be able to describe it.
Yeah.
Because what I felt or thought or considered sin,
Yep.
There's how many billions of people in the world that would have a completely different view of that. So the definition in and of itself of sin would just be so diluted that you wouldn't be able to even explain. Let's do any kind of policing for that.
There's this commentator I was reading on this. He then goes in to describe how death entered through Adam as well. And he was trying to make this point that if death could happen for millions of years before humans were created through evolutionary process. So there was no way for death to just enter at any given time. It would have just been part of the natural process. But death was a consequence of our sin, right? And not necessarily just a death to a physical death, but a spiritual death. Because, right, that's what sin does. It creates a spiritual death, a separation from Christ, from God. And so that entered the world through Adam and sin there. But then now, redemption, that's the part that's really exciting, the other side of it. Being a challenge, sorry, I got a messed up leg right now, I got to sit down. The challenge of Christians struggling with how to understand the natural world and apply it to Scripture has been documented for a very, very long time. We're not discovering something new, arguing with what we think. Augusta goes through this in one of his letters. where he's describing, he says, when humans sit and they try to use their own reason to justify the Bible, what we observe to justify the Bible, if we ever get it wrong, no one's going to believe the Bible or what you were trying to use to justify it. So if we're, and I'm using this as an example, but Marianne, don't stone me. If we try to use the plate tectonic layers and all the layers of dinosaurs and everything to justify our faith, if we ever get that wrong, they're going to come down on us like a hammer. And we know so little about our observable world. Isn't that a hard thing to stand on? And so this philosopher said we should just stick to the Bible. It's like don't mess with, and he wasn't trying to exclude us from science, but he was trying to say Christians just speak about the Christian things, leave the world to speak about the worldly things. And that goes against apologetics, but at the same time, that's the core of apologetics. Because what are we trying to do with apologetics? Use the natural world, use all these things to explain Christ, to bolster our faith and to bring people into our believing in Christ, because the natural world screams that there is a designer. And I 100% agree with that. It's just so hard to try to explain a designer through what we see through our little 80 years of life. And through a humankind experiencing life through 80 years, or how long did the guy in the Bible live? Like 700 years. He had the most he could explain because he observed the most. What do you think about that?
Well, you bring up a good point. We keep talking about evolution. We have all summer, but long before that, they were trying to disprove the existence of God, and evolution happened to finally become the one theory they thought they could really rally around.
Yep.
In fact, I believe Darwin did not even have the millions and billions of years in that came later after.
Yep.
him. They tried to continue to improve on that.
Yep.
So it's been a fight for a long time.
And that's what, and I have been to a lot of different creation museums. There's a creation museum at Mount St. Helens because they didn't believe that everything petrified took millions of years, but then they found petrified trees after the eruption of Mount St. Helens because heat and pressure created stone and turned trees into stone. And there were so many things that we thought took millions of years, but after Mount St. Helens, they observed it was so quick. We've mentioned Brad Harab. He's actually a family friend of mine. He slept in my bed before when I got kicked out to the couch when he was staying with our family. And so there's a lot of these things. I love creation science, but given this topic of trying to justify the Bible and evolution, I sat there and I became fatalist because I'm like, I don't care about that anymore because we have something that's so much more important. And I don't think that's the right thing. I'm more bringing this up as another way to think about all the apologetics we're going forward with. I think the best apologetics is evangelism of the gospel, really. And so that's what I'm trying to kind of bring you all around to that idea that, yes, we need to understand our observable world. We shouldn't live in ignorance. That is not what I'm asking for here. We shouldn't only try to justify our world through what we read in the Bible. I think it's great we have those science, but we also should have scriptural literacy to the point that people go, wow, that's incredible what they know about their Bible, just as much they know about earth science.
I don't think we should use the Bible, or excuse me, I don't think we should use science to prove the Bible accurate, but I do think we should use the Bible to prove science to be accurate.
Yep, I love that.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that. The more discoveries that we make, the more we learn. I think we're seeing that play out in real time.
It's not a science book, but where it touches on science, it's right on.
Yep. Another one of these early mishaps the religious community had with science was Galileo. What did Galileo believe was the center of the universe? The sun. And where did he believe that? Because of the Bible. The earth, I don't have that in my notes.
Catholic Church believed it was the earth. Galileo thought it was the
Sun, yeah. And it became an argument, and religion was standing on one side and science was staying on another, and the religion came with massive egg on their face. And then when you tried to use your interpretations of the Bible to justify the world, you got it so wrong. And the world beat us with that. And they'll still bring it up today in your science classes. how wrong the Catholic Church was about the solar system. It's funny how the world will hit us with whatever they got, you know?
They also believe the Catholic Church is the church.
Yeah.
We all know it's not.
No, sir. No. And I'm not trying to prescribe it, but I'm more wanting us to think about our Christian faith in a way of standing on the things. There's a phrase we all know, I hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So that's, is that our Constitution? Yeah, Declaration of Independence, yeah. So self-evident is something that we don't think about often. Self-evidence is the fact that all men are created equal. Why are all men created equal? If we go back to Genesis, because we're all created in God's image. It's so obvious if we're created in God's image that everyone has the same value because we're all children of God. That's something we can stand on, regardless of what we believe that the center of the universe is or isn't over time.
I think it's important to point out that Galileo was killed by the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
By religion, so to speak. And again, that's one of the best forms of apologetics we can have too, is to live a Christian life.
Mm-hmm.
To not behave in that way, to engage people in a friendly manner, but always with the aim of love and education.
Yeah. I completely agree. If
the evolutionist has an unhappy life and us as Christians have a happy life and they can see that, that's the best testament we can give.
100%. And that's really now, which statement is strongest? Let y'all read them real quick. Which one? I'm going to wait for someone to be brave. Has the most bearing on how we think about it. D. If we believe that God truly created the world, it answers every question about the origin of man ever before. 2, some evolutionary claims are change over time, animals change over time. Others raise real theological questions. I don't think that's the strongest one, but it is an important one to think about.
The concept of the Bible is that the spiritual is superior to the physical.
Mm-hmm.
What we see as physical is temporary.
Yep.
But the spiritual is eternal. So if you take evolution, you always have to have something to evolve from.
Yep.
You follow backwards, where did that original something come from? You can't get it unless there's something spiritual that created it.
Yep. Genesis should answer every question science asks about the origin. Oh, Mike.
I do believe that true science can deepen our understanding of scriptural things.
I completely agree, and that's why we've talked about this idea of good science, honest science, humble science, in the same way, and that is so incredible. And in the same way, humble Christianity, honest Christianity is just as powerful to move the world. We've seen, we could talk for weeks about all the things in the name of Christianity have been done wrong, and in the same way, the name of science. And I don't say that to try to make them the same. I say that to say humans are just so broken at every step of the way.
John Clayton, one of our brothers, said it best, in my opinion. He said if you have a conflict between science and the Bible, you either have a misunderstanding of the Bible or misunderstanding of science, because God created both.
Yep. I agree.
And the Bible promotes the study of science. It promotes study.
Yep. We're not supposed to go through our world with our head down, trying to play ignorant. And that's where, like, I was trying to synthesize this lesson today, trying to find a way that is encouraging that everything we learned is valuable, by at the same time pointing to what's most important, and trying to reconcile with what does the Bible and evolution teach. And I keep going back to Genesis 1:1. That's the comparison, and really where it gets to. So this is the thing I want to kind of anchor the class on and kind of reiterate. There is a creator. Humanity has a purpose. We are accountable to God. That's what creation tells us. And then the gospel tells us Christ died, Christ was buried, and Christ was risen. Our faith is not anchored in having every detail of natural history figured out. It's anchored in Jesus Christ. That's what I really wanted to get to in the very end, and read Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15 and 14 through there. But that's what I wanted to all of us to walk away from in a study of what does the Bible say about evolution. It says we're created. It says humans have a purpose, and we're accountable to this God, and that there was a plan for salvation. Again, I'll ask, how does that make us feel? Yep. There's a plan, there's a salvation, that we don't have to understand everything. Where's Blake? I want to ask him how frustrated he is working on that two-stroke engine right now, that there's something he doesn't understand, and see how much comfort it takes in not understanding something. It's a very uncomfortable thing to sit and not fully understanding our world and our processes, the things we work on, and it can be so unbelievably frustrating. But we're not supposed to have confidence in what we know. We're not supposed to have confidence in what we think we know as humans. We're supposed to have confidence in what we do know, and that is the gospel. No, sir. And that's why the angels envy us, right? Because we have faith. Because we have something that goes beyond just knowledge. We have belief.
You know, the word evolution, they've changed it now. They, like you say, evolution, and they come across as if it's proven. It's not.
Yep.
The word evolution simply means an unfolding change.
Yep.
And we all are evolving, from young people to old people, from babies to adults. I mean, it's happening all over. What we're really talking about is the theory of evolution.
Yep.
They postulate that evolution was the beginning of everything. And that's where they're wrong. They're dead wrong.
Sorry, I love that. I'm also trying to read my notes at the same time. There was an interesting thing here. So there's big three cases when I was wanting to understand what did people think throughout time. So there was the first one we went to about Christians in AD 354 to 430 were noted trying to figure out how to reconcile Genesis with the observed world, and that's when Augustine said, don't worry about that, focus on your faith. And that was one response. Asa Gray, 1810 to 1888. Gray was a leading American botanist and a committed Christian, and was an important correspondent and supporter of Charles Darwin. He took Charles Darwin's work seriously while resisting the ideas that natural process only rely on other natural processes. So this was a Christian scientist at the time who said, I can see what Darwin's trying to get to, but at the same time, I'm going to reject the idea that we all came, those very early evolutionary thoughts. And so I think that was a Christian who was trying to deal honestly with what we were observing at the time. In the same way, I encourage us not to put our head in the sand, that we're learning more all the time. We can talk about how people a couple of 100 years ago thought washing your hands was really bad for you. But if they would have read the Bible, they would have known that there was some cleanliness laws in the Old Testament.
People used to think the world was flat.
Yes, sir. Yep. And Christians probably believed it as well.
The same people that have the scriptures, but if they've been reading scripture,
Yes, sir.
it talks about
Yeah.
the world being instant.
We talk.
Science catches up. Every now and then we catch up.
Yep.
with God's design.
Yeah. But what don't we know?
Continually
Yeah.
try to make it better, and as we do, we understand more. But we're always going to misunderstand some things, I think.
Yeah. And there's a couple other cases of people who were honest with Darwin, and they have these letters back and forth of Christian scientists reconciling this with him. And those letters are, there's another one, letter series with B.B. Warfield, with him and Darwin. And so what I'm saying there is Christians should stand on what we know, be open that maybe there's so many things we don't know about the observable world today, but stick to the core, which is the gospel, which is what we have up on the screen there.
One of the things that it's taken hold of is that science does come up with a lot of good stuff. I mean, if we hadn't had space, we wouldn't have Tupperware.
Yeah.
I mean, science is creating medicine, so
yeah,
they're doing all this stuff, and what the people that are trying to push evolution is saying, see, if you just give us enough time,
yeah,
we will find out all these answers that
yeah,
you've got.
and it's go back to that philosophy. Science plus human reasoning generally can go down some weird paths, like I've mentioned. Mike?
One of the joys is that Christianity is a lifetime studying. But we're a people that would rather go to AI and ask it and get a quick question, quick answer, and we know it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's, Mike, you said it better than I did for the last 40 minutes, is there's a lot we don't know, and let's just focus on what we do know. But at the same time, let's not reject trying to use the observable world to bolster our faith and to bolster the unbelievers around us, that there is reason to what we're living in, that it is not random occurrence, and we can take a lot of excitement in that. That's all I have. Thank you all. Appreciate the comments along the way.
I've got a quick announcement. The Kilgores asked me to announce that if you want a T-shirt for our family retreat coming up next month, the forms are back here on the table, and just turn them in to Brent Whitney by the second.
Yep. Thank you.
Also, don't forget to sign up for Father's Discipline.
Discipline, not discipline. You'll have to give my dad a call so he can come and do some of that. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sign up for the family retreat is also up for dads and discipleship, and also family retreat.